first of all, before we talk Taiwan, start with China. Whenever you think about Taiwan, you need to think about China to an extent. One thing I do want to show you before we even get started. A lot of times I think it can be hard to sort of know who other nations are to us, right? What do we think of other countries? If you go to the State Department's website, it's really easy to suss out. Right on the State Department's website, at the top, there is a link that says countries and areas, right up here. And if you click in countries and areas, it will take you to a page for every single country all around the world that the U.S. State Department has dealings with. And there's a page for Taiwan that just lays out U.S. relations with Taiwan. And it'll just kind of explain to you what our relationship is. Leading democracy and a technological powerhouse, I think that phrase is kind of the key right there. A leading democracy. That's the key with Taiwan. That's what this whole thing is about. It's about democracy. You may remember when Beijing, under President Xi Jinping, China, exerted immense pressure on Hong Kong, rolled back some of the liberties that Hong Kong had, particularly things that had been promised when the British handed Hong Kong over years and years ago. Hong Kong had been able to operate with a lot more independence, relatively, which is how it had become such a financial hub and a cultural hub. Disney built a theme park there, but Beijing began to clamp down and clamp down and clamp down, and things have not been quite right in Hong Kong since. It has not been the place that it was before President Xi decided to rein Hong Kong in. It has not paid off well. Taiwan could be next. Beijing has made no secret of its desire to bring Taiwan to heel. And so the U.S. relationship with Taiwan is largely because it is a democracy in that environment that is directly connected to a heavy-handed communist, increasingly authoritarian government under President Xi Jinping, where he is now basically president for life, having gotten the laws changed in China so that he can kind of run over and over and over again. He and Vladimir Putin are very much on par in terms of their power over their party and their government and their ability to reshape it so that they just kind of stay in power. So that's the overall underpinning of all this. From the State Department document, it notes the U.S. does not have diplomatic relations with Taiwan, but we have a robust unofficial relationship. It's mostly unofficial, but it has been very, let's say, full-throated in the past. You may remember last year, Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, and that was kind of an emotional moment for China. Got very much in its feelings over that because it was a very high-level visit. The U.S. had not had such a high-level visit in a long time. And during that trip, Nancy Pelosi described her support for Taiwan and the Taiwanese people as ironclad. That was not something that China liked. China also has military exercises that happen all the time in the waters off the coast of Taiwan. Taiwan and China are basically just kind of off the shore from one another. Here, I'll show you a map really quickly. Here is Taiwan, and you can see this is the island of Taiwan right here, and this is mainland China. Taiwan sits between the South China Sea, which is another very busy military region for China these days, and the East China Sea. Taiwan is just north of the Philippines. So if you're looking at if Taiwan is a clock, China is everything from 12 to 7, basically. Hong Kong is off about 8 o'clock. 6 o'clock directly below is the Philippines. 3 o'clock is the Philippine Sea to the east of Taiwan. And at about 1 o'clock, you head towards the Korean Peninsula and Japan. So it's a busy region, but it's not far from China. It's just off the coast of China. And one of the things that's been going on is China has been doing military exercises, flybys and naval exercises, just to kind of be present in that area and to keep the heat on the Taiwanese government, letting them know, like, don't get froggy. Don't try to leap. Don't think you're going to do anything that's going to make you look like anything but a part of this country. And it has been an extremely tense relationship that's gotten more and more tense. That is part of what the State Department lays out in their document. We go back to their site. Here's part of the key. This sort of sums it up. Quote, and I'm quoting from the State Department webpage. The United States' approach to Taiwan has remained consistent across decades and administrations. The United States has a long-standing One China policy, which is guided by the Taiwan Relations Act, the 3 U.S.-China joint communiques, and the 6 assurances. Here's the net effect of that. We oppose any unilateral changes to the status quo from either side. we do not support Taiwan independence, and we expect cross-strait differences, S-T-R-A-I-T, as in a body of water. We expect cross-strait differences to be resolved by peaceful means. We continue to have an abiding interest in peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. Now, here's the complication. Consistent with the Taiwan Relations Act, the United States makes available defense articles and services as necessary to enable Taiwan to maintain a sufficient self-defense capability and maintains our capacity to resist any resort to force or other forms of coercion that would jeopardize the security or the social or economic system of Taiwan. Unquote. Pause right there. What does that mean? The U.S. is trying to stay out of it, but it can't help but be in it. Officially, the U.S. has allowed the China-Taiwan relationship to be what Beijing says it is. That Taiwan is part of China, the end. Having said that, the U.S. also is not China's buddy right now. And so it knows that China has a desire to exert ever more pressure and influence on Taiwan and ultimately to bring it fully to heel underneath Beijing, the authority of President Xi Jinping. So the U.S. is kind of in this weird, delicate dance, right? It's got this weird balance. It cannot overtly say Taiwan should be free, even though Taiwan would be a much more hospitable partner to the U.S. if it was just another full democracy. But the U.S. also can't take its hands off of Taiwan because it's one of those places in the region where China's influence keeps trying to grow. Taiwan is just one of the many areas of influence in which China would like to be able to assert its presence. So Taiwan is important in that way. So the U.S. is trying to say, okay, we want to help keep Taiwan, but it's China. We're not gonna get into that too much. That's the whole underpinning. Democracy, international trade, China's avarice for more impact on the world stage, and America's opposition to that, the West's opposition to that. That's what's underneath all of this. Does this mean that American troops are going to end up going to war depending on who wins the election in Taiwan? Probably not. But there are American naval assets who are in that part of the world all the time, very aware of what's going on in the South China Sea. So at a year when lots of people around the world are voting, elections are happening all over the planet, this is one of the most consequential ones, for sure. What's underneath this before the election? Tsai Ing-wen is the current president of Taiwan, spoke on the first of the year, said that reunification, spoke after Xi Jinping said reunification is inevitable. President Xi said that in a New Year's Eve address, which was a little bit more intense than previous remarks. Previously, it said, we are members of one and the same family. That is not quite the same as saying, we will be reunifying. President Tsai said that it's going to be up to the Taiwanese people to decide the course of Taiwan. Which way do we go? That's up to y'all. She also urged China to respect the outcome of the election, but China has cast this in a very intense way. China has said this is basically a choice between war and peace. They don't want to talk with the Taiwanese government, or haven't, under President Tsai, about this at all. This is a matter of saying either we will have peace as one nation or war as two. And if that's the way you want it, then say something, start something. Taiwan split in 1949 amid civil war, but Beijing still considers Taiwan part of China. So that's the underpinning of this. Do we finally begin to take Taiwan back, something that should never have been ripped away from us in the first place? That's sort of the key. And a lot of people have been filling the streets. This is an image from Reuters of people filling the streets at a rally for the Democratic Progressive Party, which is the ruling party. It's President Tsai's party, ahead of the elections this year. This was a picture from New Taipei City, which was taken today by Reuters. So, who's who? What's what? What do you need to know? CNN has a very nice guide to the candidates. I will pull this up for you now and give you a sense of who these people are so that you can fill out your scorecard and place your bets on who it will be. So, the DPP is the ruling party, the Democratic Progressive Party. President Tsai Ing-wen, President Tsai, is Taiwan's first female president. This is her she's finishing her second term, one in 2016 and 2020, so their elections and our elections are on the same years. Part of the Democratic Progressive Party. Chinese communist leaders don't like that party. The DPP views Taiwan as a sovereign nation, not as being part of China. She is termed out, and so now they're electing a new president. Major candidates. One candidate that people were looking at is Terry Gu, If you've ever heard the talk about, oh, Apple computers are made in Chinese sweatshops and children are working in these factories and people are jumping from the top of the factory because they're so stressed out. The company that was under pressure over the way that iPhones were built is called Foxconn. The founder of Foxconn is Terry Gou. He was going to be running in the election. He dropped out just before the deadline. So he did not register as a candidate, but he was one of the names that had been kicked around. So who are the people running for the presidency? Well, the vice president is running. Lai Ching-te. He is Taiwan's current vice president, very openly pro-independence. There's another party there called Kuomintang, which was a Chinese nationalist party that ran to Taiwan after losing the Civil War and then took control of Taiwan for a very long time, for 40 years. Hou Yu is a former police officer. He's the current mayor of New Taipei, which is a different city from Taipei. Taipei is the capital of Taiwan. New Taipei is like the New York of Taiwan. It's another major metropolitan region. And he is advocating that Taiwan and China have closer relations. Not necessarily that Taiwan accede to China's wishes and be re-annexed by China, but that the relations are less hostile and less directly antagonistic. Then you have Ko Wen-je, who is with the Taiwan People's Party, which is a very new party. It was just founded a few years ago, 2019. It's more of a centrist party. He is the former mayor of Taipei, the capital of Taiwan. He says that he'll follow President Tsai's foreign policies, but he is also advocating more talks with Beijing. So you have two candidates who are saying, maybe we can repair some of this relationship. And one candidate, who's the current vice president of Taiwan, who says, we cannot do this. This is not something that we can actually support, and we have to be independent from China. Who's in the electorate? Nearly 20 million people in Taiwan are eligible to vote. 18,000 voting stations, about 1 million first-time voters. Identity is a huge issue in terms of who we are compared to Beijing. Identity is always the issue with democracy, right? Like, who are we and what are we going to be and what's this election going to mean for our future? So far, only the Kuomintang and the Democratic Progressive Party have ever won a presidential race, which kind of makes sense. That new party was just kind of founded. If you go further back, you can see this lovely chart. 96, the Kuomintang party, the one that was very closely aligned to Beijing, won very strongly. 2000, it flipped. 2004, 2008, 2012, they did very strongly. 2016, that's when President Tsai got elected. The DPP ran away with it. 2020, the DPP ran away with it again, but Kuomintang did better. So, is there a growth in support for kind of stronger ties with Beijing? We'll see. That's one of the things that will come out at the polls. This is one of those big races that I think a lot of Americans are just going to be like, but Iowa. No, this is not the year to ignore the rest of the world. I think if this year has a lesson for any of us, it's don't ignore what's happening in these other countries. It is so consequential now in ways that it literally has never been. Half the world's democracies are voting. And Taiwan is one of the democracies that the US kind of can't have a stronger relationship with, but needs to be very involved with for an array of strategic reasons, all of which point back to China. So if the cost of consumer goods matters to you, if the opportunity for new jobs matters to you, if the fight against fentanyl and opioid addiction matters to you, if the security of the world in terms of the people who are propping up Vladimir Putin matters to you, then China has to matter. What we do about China is one thing, but whether we pay attention, I think that's kind of non-negotiable. It has to be important if any of those other matters, and if any of those other issues matters to you. And this is one of those races to pay very, very close attention to if you want to be aware of kind of what the U.S. is going to do. And it's an issue that's come up on the campaign trail a bunch. Nikki Haley has talked about being very tough on China. Ron DeSantis has tried to smack Nikki Haley, and Nikki Haley has tried to smack Ron DeSantis for being cozy with China. Joe Biden has tried to position the United States, in contrast to his predecessor, Donald Trump, as being much more stalwart against Chinese encroachment. So everyone's talking about what happens in Taiwan, and everyone's or what's happening with China. And everyone is talking about how the United States should deal with China, and this race is a big piece of that. Before I move on, Sarah asked, when will the results be known? Good question. That depends on whether or not there are any irregularities in the election. That depends on whether or not it's close. As you could see, in one of the years, in 2004, it was extremely close. The KMT, the Kuomintang party, the one that is closely aligned with Beijing, got 49.9% of the vote. And the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party, the current ruling party, got 50.1%. So if it is super ultra close, who knows how long it could take. If there are accusations of voter irregularities, who knows how long that could take. So hopefully it won't take forever, but it'll also be interesting to see whether or not any of the parties has a real strong mandate to lead, a real strong mandate to govern, or whether they're going to have to kind of split hairs, build new parliamentary alliances. Because remember, this is a parliamentary system. So they might need to make an alliance with a couple of different parties. There was a possible two-party alliance between the DPP and the TPP, but that fell apart because their rulers got into this, apparently this shouting match on live TV. They got into this dispute, not shouting match, but this dispute, and then they ended up running separately. So we'll see whether or not that needs to be revived. But watch this space. We will certainly keep an eye on it.